Okay, I'm going to dive right in now to section 2 of our program, Klamath History as Seen on Google Earth. This is a presentation we're making on the 18th of November, 2021. My name is Todd Keppel. I'm director of the Klamath County Museum. And this is a presentation sponsored by the Klamath County Historical Society. What we're doing is looking at features on the face of the earth that were made, that is marks made on the face of the earth, made upwards of 100 years ago or more, by humans working with their bare hands and tools, or with horsepower or other animal power, and occasionally with steam power. And the area that I'd like to look at right now is this area here. We've used this image in some publicity here. I don't know if you can just look at that image and guess where we're at. What I'd like to do is get onto my Google Maps window here. Oh, let's see, I need to share my screen again, don't I? Okay, let me get that going here. All right, here's the image that I was talking about that we've used in publicity, wondering if you can pick out where that image is. And now let me get back to Google Maps. We left the Klamath River Canyon here in segment 1 of our program on Klamath History as Seen from Google Earth. Let's zoom back out here and find the city of Klamath Falls again. This is where I am tonight, this evening, making this presentation. The site that we're looking at now is up at the west end of Upper Klamath Lake. We're going out basically along Highway 140 here, past the Rock Creek Ranch, past Odessa here. And here's the spot that we want to zero in on. We're near the Rocky Point area. This is the West Side Road and Highway 140 here, continuing on towards Medford. And here we can see some wetland areas along the marshy edge of Upper Klamath Lake. And we see a creek that comes down through the wetlands. I'm going to say that's Recreation Creek, if I remember right. But it's this straight line here through the marsh that I wanted to focus on. This is a cut that was made in the marsh a little more than a century ago. It was made by a company that wanted, again, to get at some timber, a logging company. It was actually the Pelican Bay Lumber Company that brought in a dredge and dredged this straight line cut through the marsh. Let's measure our distance here and see how far they had to make that cut to get from open water through the marshy edge of the lake until they hit solid ground over here. Distance of a little over a mile that they had to cut through the marsh. It's not much of a channel anymore. It's not used by anybody that I know of. It looks like it's filled in probably with Wokus there. The reason they wanted to get to solid ground here is they had a railroad logging operation that hauled in timber from these slopes around the Rocky Point area here. We've got a picture that was taken at the end of the line, the rail line, where trains, steam trains, would bring in logs. I'm going to zoom in on this photo a little bit here, widen my window out, and I think you get better resolution if I widen my window here. Okay, so yeah, here's the locomotive that Pelican Bay would have had to float across Upper Klamath Lake on a barge and then get it onto dry land. And then they built a rail system that went all through that country out around Rocky Point. And you can see, of course, Mount Pitt or Mount McLaughlin in the background there. And again, some nice big, beautiful logs coming in there. And here you can see them offloading the logs, running them down into a pond here, and then they would have rafted them out with a steam tug out through that cut that we were looking at, and then float them, probably form them up in rafts and float them down into Klamath Falls, where they'd bring them into the Pelican Bay Mill. Here you can see this photo labeled Pelican Bay Lumber Company. I showed this photo to a group of, I actually showed it to the Hoo Hoo Club last week. The Hoo Hoo Club, if you don't know, is a group of local retired lumber and logging guys, workers. And something that one of them pointed out that I'd never noticed is that the rail grade here is sloped a little bit from side to side. The one rail here would have been on the left side as the engineer is facing out the locomotive, as a little bit higher than the rail on the right side. And so this engine is sitting on a little bit of a slope from side to side. And why would they do that? Well, it's so that the cars then would have a little bit of slope to them to make the logs roll easier coming off of those cars, and then on down the slope into the water. So that's just a little interesting little detail that I had never noticed. So this operation went in the early 1900s, and interesting that they had this independent rail line not connected with the main line, just their own railroad logging system out there. Something I just learned fairly recently is that there was an accident. Well, there was the threat of an accident one day when probably this very locomotive right here in October of 1917 was headed downhill with a string of cars loaded, and the locomotive lost its brakes. And so whenever that situation happened, you had just a few seconds to make an important decision. Jack Bowden, a local amateur historian and author, wrote about this in his fantastic book, Railroad Logging in the Klamath Country. He wrote about how once a train has lost its brakes, headed downhill with a load, with cars loaded with logs, you've got just a few seconds to decide, do you want to jump while the train's still moving fairly slowly, or do you stay on it and ride it out and hopefully the train stays on the tracks? So there were 4 guys on the train one day coming down when it lost its brakes. The engineer urged the 3 other men to jump. They did. They got roughed up pretty bad. One of them broke his neck, a fellow by the name of C.A. Otis, and he died on the scene. He's buried up in Lakeville Cemetery, and we visited his grave recently in our Night at the Cemetery program. As it turned out, the locomotive, probably this very locomotive here, stayed on the tracks and eventually coasted to a stop at the bottom of the hill. So jumping turned out not to be the right decision for Mr. Otis. Well, so that's our look at the Pelican Bay Cut out here in the Rocky Point area. One other spot that I wanted to point out here in the middle part of the Klamath Basin is right here in the town of Klamath Falls. A mark made on the landscape 100 years ago to the year in 1921. There's a mark made in the landscape right here where Upper Klamath Lake has its outlet into the Link River. This is a mark that was made in the landscape that was actually discussed at some length a couple of months ago in another Historical Society program. Moss Driscoll, who is an official at the Klamath Reclamation Project, did a program, and he talked about how the California-Oregon Power Company back in 1921 made a mark in the earth that we still see to this day. And here's an example of it right here. In 1921, the California-Oregon Power Company built Link River Dam, which gave them the ability to store more water in Upper Klamath Lake. And at the same time, that same year in 1921, they also cut trenches in a pair of reefs at the outlet of Upper Klamath Lake. And this photo shows what we refer to as the upper reef. This basalt reef that you see here across the outlet of the lake is what was the natural dam that formed Upper Klamath Lake. And the overall elevation of this reef here would have been on average about 4,140 feet above sea level. That would have been roughly the average lake level for Upper Klamath Lake. By cutting this reef here, the power company was able to draw more water out of the lake and increase their production of power. They did the same thing on the lower reef, which is down by Link River Dam. So I'm going to switch back to Google Maps here and show you where this cut was made. So again, we're on the west side of Klamath Falls. Here's Highway 97, Upper Klamath Lake with its outlet into Link River. That upper reef was located right here. This was the choke point for the outlet of Upper Klamath Lake. And as we zoom in here, you can see Putnam Point on Lakeshore Drive. This is where you can get right out on the edge of that point and look across the lake at Pelican Marina there. You see there's a little bit of an island here in the middle of the channel. I'm going to switch actually to Google Earth here rather than Google Maps. So this is my Google Earth window, and I'll navigate up here to that same channel, flatten out my view here a little bit. And the nice thing about Google Earth is they've got this feature here. I'll show you where this is if you're not familiar with it. In Google Earth, there's a clock here with an arrow going in a counterclockwise direction. You can use this bar here to go back in time to satellite photos that were taken earlier. Here's one from 2016. And then there's this picture from 2013 where the lake was a little bit lower, and you can see more of that island that's out in the middle of the channel. This again is the reef. That was the natural control for water levels in Upper Klamath Lake. And this section right here is where the California-Oregon Power Company cut their channel. So the water is actually several feet deep right off Putnam Point here, and that allowed them to drain more water out of Upper Klamath Lake. I'm going to go back to the more recent aerial photo or satellite photo taken 2 years ago in 2019. Downstream here is Link River Dam, and the lower reef in the river was right above the dam here. And again, if we go back to that earlier photo from 2013, you can see more of the reef that's exposed there. Again, I want to flatten out the view here. So this is the lower reef that controlled water levels in Upper Klamath Lake. Both of these reefs together would have constricted the flow coming out of the lake. And here you can see channels that were cut by the power company, this one on the east side of Link River, and then another one on the west side of Link River that allowed them to get more water over the dam. This dam constructed in 1921, 100 years ago, and then these channels also cut that same year. So this channel was able to feed water directly into the West Side Canal, where the power company had a hydroelectric plant down at basically just off Main Street. And then this channel would have been able to feed water directly into the east side flow line. This wasn't an open canal, but a wooden flow line that was constructed in 1924. And so they were able to get water into both of those channels. In order to dig these channels, they had to put in a cofferdam in order to shunt the flow of water from one side of the river to the other while they were excavating these channels. And you can actually see remnants of their cofferdam. In fact, they used logs on either side of a dike of rocks, and the logs are actually still out there in Link River. If you went out there right now, I think you would, from the Link River Trail, you'd be able to see this cofferdam. Earlier in the year, it's covered up with water. So this picture taken in June of 2016, but in 2013, the picture was taken in August, and the lake was quite a bit lower, and so you can see the reef as well as the cofferdam. So again, marks made in the earth 100 years ago, in this case exactly 100 years ago, still visible on Google Earth and Google Maps. Let's see, I want to check my lineup of photos here to see if I'm missing anything regarding Link River Dam. Actually, I'm going to take a couple of minutes here to talk about one more thing. Here's the outlet of Upper Klamath Lake before the channel was cut. And you can see there's a kind of a marshy reef that extended almost all the way across the river during periods of low flow. Here's another view of that reef looking the other direction. Here we're up above Pelican Marina, looking to the south. And so here's where the road comes around from Lakeshore Drive, past Moore Park, and then by Putnam Point here. And here's that marshy edge where the reef controlled the water level. Switching back to Google Maps, I just wanted to show one other feature from the early days of irrigation. The original canal that was built by farmers, not by the government, but by farmers in the area, was called the Ankeny Canal. And it was a canal that diverted water out of the river and along the side of the Link River Canyon. And here is a trace of the old Ankeny Canal. Started probably in the 1870s. It would have wound around the California Avenue area. It went right directly behind the Baldwin Hotel Museum. There's no trace of the canal here in town anymore, but it went kind of along Pine Street, and then it ended up connecting about where the government built the A Canal here. And from here, the canal went all the way out to Henley. We've got a picture of that canal being constructed. Here's a picture of that work being done, not with bulldozers, not with excavators, no steam shovel here. This is all rock work done by hand with pick and shovels. They probably would have had animals to move the material somewhat. This is one of my favorite pictures to show, especially love showing this picture whenever I'm making a presentation to school kids, because I always tell kids I can see myself in this picture. I wonder if you can see who you would want to be in this picture. I'd want to be this guy right here. I always tell the kids, kids, stay in school, get your diploma, learn to be the guy that wears a vest and leans on his walking stick. And so hopefully we inspire kids to go ahead and graduate. I'll show you a couple of more pictures of that canal once it was complete. This is the Ankeny Canal and the Link River Canyon. And then I'm going to open up another photo here. Take it a second to load. Another view of the Ankeny Canal. This is the west side of the Link River Canyon here. And so the Link River Trail that we walk on would be over here on the far side of the river. Here's the Ankeny Canal on the east side of the river. And if we zoom in enough on this photo, we can actually see the Moore Brothers lumber mill up about 2/3 of the way up the Link River Canyon. So again, this is our view of the Ankeny Canal. I'll show you one more quick view of that in Google Maps along the east side of the River Canyon. This is the Ankeny Canal here. Using an oblique view, you get a better sense of how they diverted water out of the river and ran it along this canal on the side of the channel here. All right, so I think that pretty well wraps up my second segment of our program, Klamath History as Seen on Google Earth.
Be sure to watch part 3, which will include the GPS coordinates for some of the scenes.